Hello and welcome to Just Onside. My name is Abe Patel. I'm a happy man. My colleague Owais Ahmed is not a happy man. Owais, you're smiling now, you're laughing now, but I presume it
Oh,
was a disappointing weekend. How are you, my friend?
it's a rare weekend when Leeds win and Arsenal don't. So I'll let you have this one. I'm doing well. Thank you so much, Ayub. I'm doing really well. How are you?
Well, I'm not sort of sure about this. It's a rare in the championships. We win quite often, so it's a regular occurrence. But it was an excellent performance. Obviously, we did the shoot just before the game. I was a little bit nervous. We don't have a great record after international breaks. We've got a few injuries as well, but it was an outstanding performance against a difficult Sheffield United side because they've not conceded. I think it was about 4 games, 5 games they've not conceded. So exceptional performance. The performance in the middle of the park, Rothwell, former Blackburn player, and Tanaka was magnificent. So very, very happy. We've got a game tomorrow, so there's a quick turnaround. But I'm quietly optimistic. I think I'm expecting us to do quite well tomorrow as well. So happy days, certainly on my part. Uh, for you, obviously, we alluded to the point that you're not a happy man. It was an interesting weekend in
I'm
the
fine.
Premier League. Yeah, it's 48 hours later. So obviously, well, I suppose 24 hours later. So you've had time to reflect on the result. But a really interesting weekend, some good games, some surprising results. Obviously, we're going to start off with Bournemouth Arsenal. And again, it seems to be a perennial problem for the Arsenal, a sending off, which obviously impacted the game. So talk about the sending off, talk about obviously the result and where that leaves Arsenal, because it's a game that I presume Arsenal would have at the start of the season at least looked at potentially 3 points, certainly not 0 points. So, what's your thoughts on that game?
Yeah, I mean, look, maybe the fact that I've come away for a few days with the families maybe helps soothe some of that pain that you speak of, or you maybe that's what's helped. Look, I think first and foremost, I don't really think Arsenal deserved much out of the game, in fairness. Um, they've been they've gone to the well a few times this season already. You mentioned obviously they've been down to 10 men multiple times this season, and actually been down to 10 men and having to play the remainder of the game in terms of majority of minutes with 10 men as well. We're not talking like your regular 70th minute sending off or a 75th minute sending off. We're talking sendings off either before half time in Trossard's case against Manchester City. Declan Rice was immediately after half time against Brighton, and now in the 30th minute or roughly there or thereabouts with William Saliba on Saturday afternoon. Look, it's a game they would have wanted to win, but I think we should give Bournemouth credit. In the end, they persevered. I mean, there was nothing really 11 against 10 where I thought definitively that Bournemouth were going to get the opener, but the opener they did, and in the end deserved to win the game. I mean, look, in terms of the sending off, I think we should jump straight into it, Ayub. I think it's one of those subjective calls. Truth be told, there's a lot of different interpretations you could give. Look, it's a really poor ball from Trossard. Anytime you're going backwards, especially in the air, you're gonna leave, your players in some sort of trouble somewhat. If it's in the air, they've got to control it. They've got to make sure they get it on the full. If it's at least on the floor, it can either go back to the keeper or to your centre back directly. The fact that he tried to play what was a very unusual ball put Saliba in a bit of a difficult spot. Now, look, he's panicked. Let's be very clear, and I don't want to really hurt him. I don't want to really blame him too much. He's still a very young centre back. He's an elite centre back. It's very easy to say he should just let him go and let his pace recover. I think we've all been there as defenders and we've seen it. There's a certain instinctive nature that kicks in at that point. The atmosphere, the noise. It's just there's a heightened level of sense. So I don't mind too much. I mean, I actually think, truth be told, you may say I'm biased. I do think Ben White would have got around simply because A, the ball's in the air, which means by the time Evan Nilsson's got through and trapped it, got through on goal. Ben White, who you know, Ayub, he's pretty rapid,
Mm,
let's be
yeah, yeah.
honest. And you always favour the person off the ball than on the ball in terms of distance to be covered. So I think Ben White would have got around by the time Evan Nielsen would have taken an attempt at goal. And I think that level of nuance is needed when you're going to make such an important decision. That's the only thing I would say. I think the disappointing thing from my side is it could have gone either way. So I don't really feel too strongly either way. The referee's made a call though on the pitch. Now he's seen it pretty clear. I mean, he can see the distances. He's got an unimpeded view. He's about 10 yards from the action in terms of where Saliba and Evan Nielsen tangled. So for me, for him to give a yellow card and then to have VAR intervene seems a little inconsistent. I think you would agree, Ayub, in terms of what we've seen previously, which is if he's made a call and there's nothing impeding this view or there's other additional information that should be shared with him, fair enough. But you think, well, he's seen everything. It's not as if it's happened super fast. So the fact he's given a yellow card, given probably the distance yet to be covered, it was a little disappointing. But look, from an Arsenal perspective, they are probably just on the wrong end of some of these, I would call 50-50 type decisions. And what I mean is, as a club, as a team, you've got to not put yourself in those positions, right? There's no point winning moral victories afterwards saying, oh, we've had to play with 10 men, but that's not good enough. Ultimately, if you want to challenge for the Premier League title, you as has been the reaction from many a player and the manager there afterwards, is you can't keep doing this. Simply put, you've got to avoid those type of situations. Again, somehow the defender's got to think you've got to let him go through. If he scores, he scores. It's 31 minutes. There's plenty of time to recover the situation. And again, I still wouldn't back him to score. There's too many things that have to happen. Saliba can get back. White can get back on the cover. He's still got to be a top goalkeeper in Raya. So look, definitely a subjective call. Bit disappointing it was overturned. I would say I don't think it was a clear and obvious error, regardless of where you stand. But in the end, I don't think Arsenal did enough. I know they had a great opportunity at 0-0 through Martinelli to have to open the scoring, but it was a relatively conservative team selection. Needs must. I mean, they were missing some big players, Odegaard, Saka, and obviously Saliba for the rest of the half. But yeah, rest of the game. But again, ultimately, if you want to challenge for the big stuff, you've got to somehow find a way. Nobody wants to hear in terms of poor excuses. So I thought they could have edged their way through another victory. Wasn't meant to be, again, missing a few other key players in Timber and a few others. But maybe perhaps given their level of performance this season, which has been spotty, you mentioned on the last podcast that they've had to pull a few out against Southampton, against Leicester, and maybe this time uh, uh, against another team from the South Coast, they weren't able to quite pull it off. Again, no real complaints from my side. It was a really bad day. The missing creativity, that's pretty obvious. You take Odegaard and Saka out of the team for any lengthy period of time, you're not going anywhere. You're not even achieving Champions League spots, in my humble opinion. So, look, I think it's a bad day, but I don't think it's still too early. I think they've got to show that they can come through this. We'll probably, if you don't mind, talk a little bit about Howard Webb's presence in the stadium during the game as well. But from an overall perspective, bad day at the office. Credit to Bournemouth. Don't have too many complaints about the red card, other than perhaps the fact that it was overturned there afterwards. But yeah, Arsenal, we want to get back on that bike, and it's a huge game next weekend as well.
Fair enough assessment. I mean, just my point on the penalty. You sort of talked about it. I mean, I he's a international player. He's a world class player, Saliba, and I think considering where the offence took place, that's where my concern would be. That I could understand if it was in the penalty box, where maybe you're having to make a decision. There is plenty of space from where the incident happened, and obviously where the goal is. So it's one where he shouldn't have been rushed. He's an experienced international player. He shouldn't have been rushed. He should have had enough confidence in his own ability. You don't want to give the referee an opportunity. Now, obviously, the referee overturned the decision based on VAR, but you don't want to give any opportunities for a decision to be made. I thought it was something that I would not expect a player of Saliba's caliber to do. Bournemouth aren't mugs. They've got a really good coach and they're a decent side. I mean, I won't sort of say obviously they're a side that's going to finish top 10, but they're always there or thereabouts. But the worrying sign is, this is what, third or fourth sending off that the Arsenal have had. And it's a habit that is, I sort of suspect, I don't know what it is. I mean, this is something that you can sort of say, well, it's not a rash challenge, but I think it is a rash challenge. It's something that you'd expect players playing for the Arsenal, the way that they've been playing over the last 3 or 4 seasons. They're always there and thereabouts. So you'd expect them to be mentally absolutely on it. And this was almost like a moment of mental sort of fragility, weakness. He's made a decision, a poor decision, mentally. So it's disappointing. And you can't afford to drop points. I think these are games that really, at worst, it should have been a point. At worst, bearing in mind, obviously, you've got Liverpool, you've got Man City, who are just going to keep on winning games, winning games. Obviously, we're going to talk about those teams afterwards. But it's a, I wouldn't say it's a make or break season. Certainly from my point of view, it's an important season. He's been there, what, 3 or 4 years, Arteta,
Yes.
and he hasn't won anything. I know obviously we we,
And
we have
FA
different
Cup.
metrics. We have different metrics, but for me, it's you cannot. This is a season where he really needs now. In my opinion, if he's going to win the league, it's got to be this season. He's had a couple of years where he's toyed, he's been close. Uh, if it's another season where they're close, to me, it's I don't know. He really should now be a team that's seriously contenders to win the league, and these are results that ultimately, remember when you're dealing with Man City and Liverpool, it's the barest of margins, as Ian Smith would say. So these are results that you cannot afford come the end of the season. So I personally am I'm sort of thinking, well, I don't know. Maybe this is not just a one-off. You're just saying it's a bad day at the office. I perhaps think there's a little bit more to it than meets the eye. Maybe these sending offs, perhaps there's something not quite mentally. They're perhaps making sort of rash decisions at key moments.
Yeah, I think, look, there's two different points, really well covered. I think there's two different points there. One, I do agree with you. One, I probably fundamentally disagree with. I mean, the point around the sendings off is fair. I think each three of them, there are some mitigating circumstances. But the fact is, again, I mentioned, you don't want to keep winning moral victories, and you don't want to keep putting extra wear and tear on those legs and asking the rest of your teammates to be defending for large periods of time, especially when there's few issues in certain areas of the pitch, selection wise. To put extra wear and tear, the games are coming thick and fast.
Mm,
If you're playing with 10 men against, to your point, well, against most half decent opposition, they're gonna run you around and run you ragged, which is also why I took umbrage to Roy Keane's comments because playing 10 men against most teams will be difficult. Playing them against
mm,
the best team in the world is nigh on impossible. But anyway, we digress. Look, I agree with you to that extent. There is some, and we'll probably, I want to say, I don't think there's a fragility there. I really don't. But what I would say though is in years gone by, Arsenal have at times shot themselves in the foot. Various different iterations of that team. There have been times when I wouldn't say taken the easy option, but in games when you really need to just back to the wall and stay compact and stay strong and mentally just stay with it for 96, 97 plus minutes. At times previously, there's been moments where they've given into the easy option and made a rash challenge, giving a penalty or a red card and what have you. And you're just starting to see some of that again. Now, I think they're a mentally very strong team, to be honest. You can't go to their Etihad, play how they did. You can't go to Spurs, play how they did. I mean, they beat Villa as well, even though Villa had a lot of great moments. So, do I think Arsenal have been great this season? No. So I agree with you to that extent. The only thing I would disagree with you is your perhaps assessment of Arteta. You know how I feel about this. I mean, look, I don't think success comes in these different these kind of phase steps. Sometimes it comes where you might have a slightly drop back season and you come again. You saw that with Klopp multiple times when he had injuries and all the rest of it. I think he's an elite manager. I really do. I think he's a top coach, and I think Arsenal, in my opinion, are a top team. But you prove that on the pitch consistently, time in, time out. Now, I think they've done that over the last 2 seasons. They are a good team. But again, you don't get, you don't, you start every season again, start afresh, and they've got to prove, once they start to get some of these players back that they can go on a bit of a run and be that top team where they're not going to concede as much and they're going to be solid and they're not going to, be down to 10 men and win games relatively handily, at least against opposition that they should be doing. So, and I think Bournemouth, respectfully, even though they are a good team with a good coach, Arsenal still should have had too much.
mm.
Although when I saw Saka was missing, I'll be honest, I was worried because that whole. I mean, I think Ben White, Odegaard, and Saka is about as good a triangle as you're going to get in the Premier League in terms of that side of the pitch. To have two-thirds of that missing with Ben White still making his way back into the team after injury was always going to be a struggle. He chose a very functional midfield. And in the end, once they went down to 10 men, it was always going to be an uphill struggle. I'm with you. I don't think they can afford too many more setbacks. They've got a tough run of games, but this is the Premier League. You've got to earn it. So I'm okay with my team trying to earn their way to a Premier League title challenge.
Okay, that's Arsenal, Bournemouth. Uh, we'll go to City, and if you can, though, start on the actual sort of winning goal first, because there's a huge amount of controversy. Lots of fans who don't support Man City or sort of say that they seem to be always whenever there's any good fortune to go around, it always goes Man City's way. So, what's your take on the goal overall game? And maybe I suppose this is a reflection of City. It's never over. I mean, they sort of did it against your boys, scored a very, very late goal. That was an equaliser. This was a very, very late goal, albeit controversial, to win the game. Crucial 3 points. So, talk about the goal. What do you think?
I think this one very much sits in the grey area. I'll start first, perhaps, if I may, on Gary O'Neill's reaction. Honestly, you know I'm a big fan of Gary O'Neill, probably too big a fan. But honestly, the way he
Bottom of
articulated
the table.
bottom of the table, I think I think even you would agree. He's a good. I mean, look, come on, they've had their two best players sold from underneath him. I mean, Wolves are not going places if you're going to keep selling your best players. Simply put, you can't do that. I'm sure you would agree, looking at Leeds and how
Mm.
they functioned over the last couple. But um, the way he articulated himself after the game and in the post-match press conference, honestly, I'd tell many a manager. Look, he's bottom of the table. They've had a goal given against them, or a goal overruled at the last minute. Imagine that draw, what that would have done for Wolves. And he's
Mm.
articulated himself so professionally, so well. Not woe is me. He's talked about how referees are not intentionally doing this against Wolves. He's spoken about how subconsciously there's something there, perhaps with the big boys, especially Man City. And again, he articulates himself so, so well, talking about how his senses are heightened when Pep Guardiola and Man City come into town. So surely referees were also human beings, how that could affect them as well. So again, hats off to him. I thought he dealt with that issue very well when he could have been frothing at the mouth and just effing and blinding and all sorts because
Mm.
they've not had much
Mm.
go for them over the last 18
Mm.
months, I
Yeah.
swear. Look at some of the decisions. So I think he's handled himself really well. Um, Look, I think it's a really difficult one, Ayub. For me, it comes down to the spirit of the law. Honestly, and I won't go down this road because you know where I'm going. I think, look, Bernardo Silva cannot be offside from the corner. That's pretty much clear. And again, give Stones huge amount of credit. He's come up with two big, big moments for them already this season, giving him a point against Arsenal, 3 points yesterday. Um, so huge kudos to City. They keep going. They keep, it's not by fluke, right, that they pull off all these late goals. The one thing I would say though is I think it's just the spirit of the law where I feel as though that this perhaps could have been disallowed. I don't have an issue with the offside because the offside can only be offside from the moment Stones heads the ball. Okay. He can't be offside from the corner. He can only be offside from Stones's header. Now, is he in an offside position when Stones heads it? He is. Like he's just generally speaking, he's in an offside position. Is he at that point impeding the goalkeeper or affecting his line of sight? No, I don't think he is. I think he's by this time he's in a coward position, a little bit to the left of camera, so to the goalkeeper's right, if I may. The only thing I would say though, which is weirdly seems not to have been considered too much, is has he impeded the goalkeeper in terms of physically impeding the goalkeeper? Now, this is a bit of a grey area, but we've seen how goalkeepers are handled. Are you, for the most part, they're given a fair deal of protection, right? I remember famously, I think it was last year at the Etihad when Alisson was, I'd say, somewhat fortunate at the Etihad in terms of um, where there was a little bit of contact. Again, depends where you stand on goalkeepers and how much a little impact is, because a little impact can affect the goalkeeper significantly because he's going up with his hands. So even a little knock on the elbows could affect him. So for me, the fact that Bernardo Silva is backing into him and that Jose Sars had to slightly push him off him, uh, in conclusion, my argument is by being in that offside position, he has gained an advantage. The offside is not so much relevant, but he's had to, because he's impeding the goalkeeper. Has he fouled him? Has he not? Normally, those do get given for the goalkeeper, to be honest with you. The fact that he's backing in and not allowing the goalkeeper. Now, remember that I have it both ways in the sense of it's not necessary that the goalkeeper's got claim to all this real estate around him. Look, ultimately, it's up to the goalkeeper. Come on, if he wants the ball, he's got to find a way to claim it. But I think if you're impeding his way, I think if you're just naturally in a position and not forcefully moving left, right into him to impede him, I think that's fair enough. But I think here he's actually backing in a little bit, and then Jose Sal has to kind of force him off, fend him off, if that makes
Mm.
sense. Now, some may argue Wolves have been a tad naive. Maybe they could have sent someone into Bernardo as well to kind of protect the goalkeeper, to give a goalkeeper a free release. Um, but I think if you look at Gary O'Neill's argument about the fact that West Ham's goal last year, I don't know if you saw his comments afterwards, he spoke about how Kilman's goal, I think it was last season, was disallowed against West Ham. So I went and how it was disallowed under similar circumstances. I watched the game. I watched the quick highlights of that game just to see the goal and see if there were similarities. And weirdly, actually, the Wolves goal, so just to give you a little bit of context, I think it's 2-1 to West Ham. A corner comes in from the Wolves player and Kilman heads it in. And as he heads it in, there's a player, Wolves player, who's slightly in the eye line of the goalkeeper. The goalkeeper apparently after the event talks about how he wasn't really in my line. I could still see the ball, to be fair. But again, coming back to the spirit of the law, Kilman's header was never going to be saved by the goalkeeper. Never. So the fact that it was disallowed, for me, the spirit, it's gone against the spirit of it. Because for my view is, has he really prevented the goalkeeper from making a clear attempt at a save? Not really. He's not saving it. It's one of those. He's just not saving it. So for me, what I would say in conclusion, I think Bernardo Silva does impede him. I think that bit for me is clear. I don't think it's an offside situation because I think by that time he's a little bit away. But by being in that position, in an offside position, the fact that he's impeded him a little bit and all the rest of it, goalkeepers normally tend to get that. Again, to Gary O'Neill's point, is there some subconscious when a referee has to view that incident in the 96th minute, 97th minute, on the screen, on the monitor. Remember, it's a VAR who's intervened and said, we think this could be a goal, by the way. You need to have a look. I'm okay with that because it is a bit of a subjective. But the fact that there wasn't a great deal of focus on the fact that Bernardo Silva is backing into him prior to the goal, prior to the corner coming in, is the bit where I've seen many situations where goalkeepers tend to get that. And I'm surprised that bit wasn't given as much focus, it seems, in the decision-making process. There seemed to be a bit too much focus on, is he offside? Is he impeding the goalkeeper from a vision perspective and all the rest of it? So that's where I stand. It's a bit of a tricky one. I think it is a grey area. I don't think it's open and shut. I do think, however, as the corners coming in, Bernardo Silva's, I wouldn't say aggressively doing so, but doing enough
Mm.
from a backing in perspective where I've seen those given where it's a foul. Now, if he's just standing his ground, saying to the goalkeeper, "You want to go around me? So be it. Have at it." I think that would have been fine. The fact that Bernardo's genuinely impeding him in terms of backing in, I think that's the bit that could have caused the foul and could have led to the goalkeeper referee disallowing that goal. That's just my view.
The only thing I would sort of say is that impeding keepers is quite common practice at set pieces. So this is the question then, because this is not that unusual now. Every time there's a set piece, especially corners, if you just look around the box, there's a lot of players who will always be trying to impede the keeper. Now, at what stage do you say, right, it's fine? That was at quite an early stage of the play, because every corner, I guarantee you, there will be one or two players who are trying to ensure that the keeper doesn't have freedom of movement. So are we going to give a free kick, or are we going to say, all right, it's not a goal if there is a goal because there was some sort of infringement, maybe 4 or 5 seconds before the goal? So that's my concern on what Silva was doing. He had no intention apart from impeding the keeper. So certainly from that point of view, if that constitutes an infringement, then to me that should be a goal. What was Silva's function there? Was he trying to affect play? Yes, he was, by impeding the keeper. That's all he was there for. He wasn't looking at a header or anything like that. His job solely was to ensure that he makes it difficult for the keeper. So this is where now really, for me, it needs to be explained from an official. What's the situation? If a player is only and solely intending to make it difficult for a keeper to have freedom of movement, what does that mean? Does that mean then it's a foul? How much time has to elapse before it's considered right? We're back onto the normal run of play.
Yeah, I think it's a fair observation on your part. I think you mentioned the word function and look from an Arsenal perspective, Ben White does it a lot during Arsenal games. What I would say is Ben White also gets whistles blown on him multiple times as well if he goes too aggressive into the goalkeeper. And I'm okay with that, by the way. Ben White's more about being a nuisance, but trying to be subtle with it, where he's not necessarily trying to impede the goalkeeper. Now, he's done it a few times last season where he's either hooked the goalkeeper or hooked his underarm so he can't free his arms. And again, he'll get blown at. And I'm like, yeah, so be it. I mean, it is what it is. Again, I think what some teams are trying, and I think that's fine as well, is where they're standing around the goalkeeper just to be a natural blocker, if I
Mm.
may say, rather than actually saying, hey, where's the goalkeeper going? Let me go into him a little bit here, let me go into him there. That's different. That's where you're redirecting your movements. The thing I would say about one more thing about the Wolves situation is they spoke about their goal that was previously disallowed, and the reasoning given from an offside perspective was, again, the Wolves goal disallowed against West Ham, which Gary O'Neill spoke about in the post-match press conference, was because the Wolves player had proximity to the goalkeeper. Uh, that's the reason why the goal was disallowed. Now, what I would say is Bernardo Silva has incredibly close proximity to Jose Sa, even at the time when Stones heads it. So aside from the fact I think he's probably impeding him at the start of the corner as Foden, I think it was Foden swinging it in, the corner in. I think clearly by the time the head is made, their feet are pretty close by, Sars and Bernardo Silva. So there's still relative proximity. Again, no two goals, no two incidents are the same. I would never vouch for that. I would never advocate that. But I think, again, the way Gary O'Neill articulated, I thought was superb, was just, is there something subconscious? I mean, the referee's having to go to the monitor and he knows this decides a Man City draw, a Man City winner. It's a huge decision. I mean, he knows this is a huge, huge decision. And look, Howard Webb, we jumped from it, and I'll come back to it later on in the podcast, but he spoke about it on the overlap when he was on this week, where he says, look, we know that there are some games which are broadcast all around the world, which means that there are some referees that we will protect from those type of games, and we will make sure that we've got the best referees for those best games. And he was arguing that although every 3 points is important, even down at the bottom, Southampton against Leicester, which was a hunting as well. He was just saying that there are some games that mean more, clearly. And again, this is what I'm talking about. These decisions mean a little bit more perhaps than a game between 17th against 19th, if you get my drift. So
Mm.
there is some
Yeah.
subconscious heaviness to the decision that the referee has to feel. And maybe he thinks, I've got to allow for the goal. Again, I'm not sure. I'm not sure. That's always a very difficult thing to prove what the pressures are on a human being when he's making a decision like that, because the referees are human beings. But again, I thought they were a tad, Wolves were a tad unlucky with that one.
All right, so you're saying that it shouldn't have been given a goal. Is that what you're saying?
I just think he's impeding him. I
Yeah.
think the offside thing's one thing, but I don't mind the offside thing so much as the fact that he has impeded him. Like he's backing in. Like again, he's not in a natural position. He's backing into him as the corner's given. Now again, Wolves may argue, some may argue Wolves are a bit naive. They should get an enforcer around Bernardo Silva. He's only
Mm.
respectfully 4'2" or whatever he is. But anyway, the point is get around him and just shove him to one side, so to speak, and make sure your goalkeeper perhaps as a free runner, a catch or a punch, which will preserve a point, right? That's what I would want, by the way, in the last kick of the game. I want my corner goalkeeper to have a free release to catch or a punch to give us a point because it's the last kick of the game. So yeah, maybe a little bit naive on Wolves' side. But from a Man City perspective, yeah, incredible reserves there at the end to pull off another amazing victory.
Right. Just a final point on that. If this was, I mean, you've sort of talked about it. If it was Fulham versus Crystal Palace, and that was Crystal Palace scoring a winner, would that, what would have been the outcome? Would that have been given or not given?
It's hard to say, I guess, but the on-field decision was offside. If you remember last year, I think it was, or was it the year before? You might remember when Nathan Ake scored that header, and
Mm.
Burnt Leno
Yeah.
made a dive, and clearly there was somebody who was in an offside position. I think it might have been a Kanji. And Michael Oliver was on referee watch, and he was advised that, I don't think he's affecting the play, and the goal was given. And then Howard Webb 6 weeks later said, no, that was the wrong decision. Actually,
Mm.
clearly it should have been Leno was affected. So look, it's hard to say you in terms of that hypothetical. Perhaps wouldn't have made the same furore to you. I think that's what you're alluding to.
Well, I'll tell you, if it was Fulham versus Crystal Palace or teams of that ilk, the goal wouldn't have stood. I think because it was Manchester City. I know obviously there's this uh, uh, sort of wave of opinion that somehow City always are treated slightly more favourably, but I think genuinely, I think it was sort of middle of the road teams. that wouldn't have been given. It's just so because it's Man City. I think they sometimes there's and you talked about it. Sometimes referees, officials are influenced, whether it's obviously certainly subconscious, because I can't believe some referee would consciously show bias, but I think subconsciously there must be a bias. So that's my final thought. I thought it was a decision that was given to Man City. Maybe it probably would have been given to some other big teams, but certainly the smaller teams like Wolves always on the receiving end of rough decisions, and it could have huge impact, because if they go down by 2 points, they'll look back on games like this and thinking, well, maybe it was these bad decisions that we got which impacted our position in the Premier League. But that's enough about that game. Let's talk about, in my opinion, the game of the weekend, Liverpool Chelsea. Uh, a really good game. I mean, it probably wasn't a great spectacle, but in terms of two heavyweights, and I do consider Chelsea now as heavyweights, very, very impressed with Chelsea, albeit they didn't win the game, they didn't draw the game, they lost the game, but I was very impressed. So what was your take on this game?
Luckily, I managed to watch this game in its entirety, and I'm grateful that I did, mainly due to the fact that me and the family were going for a hike, and luckily we only made it halfway up the mountain. So luckily we got our way down, and then got home, got to the hotel for the game. Look, I think you're right in terms of the spectacle. I think the wind was one factor. I don't know if you saw, but it was quite clearly, rumor has it was quite windy in the northwest as well.
It certainly was. Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, yeah.
but at Anfield, in Liverpool, it was very windy. So give both sets of players credit because they've still served up a half decent game, and you could tell the ball was holding up in many a case. So that's the first thing. I really enjoyed it. Thoroughly enjoyable game. Lots to like in my opinion for both teams. Really good game to watch. I thought yes, I think. I think the game's crystallized perhaps where both teams are to some extent. Liverpool still, although they've got some new players, they're still the spine running through that team. Yes, Alisson was missing, but in terms of Van Dijk, Salah, there's some key players who've been there for quite some time. Still a relatively settled time because the DNA of that team still in terms of the Klopp era and what have you. Now Slots obviously bringing about some of his subtle changes, but you could tell that's a team that's played for a number of years, Trent Alexander, Robertson, and all the rest of it, at home. And what I really like from a Liverpool perspective, if I may quickly, and then I'll jump on to Chelsea, is I think Liverpool last year, they came unstuck surprisingly near the end because ultimately they did not put a high enough premium on keeping clean sheets. And what I mean is, even when they hit the summit and hit the top, and you were very bullish about their chances, at you, as I was, to be fair, it felt as though at that time they could have really just tightened up their defense and said, right, we're going to that kind of it's the last 7, 8, 10 games. We're just gonna keep clean sheets and we'll find solutions up front because they invariably always do. They've got a wonderful attack and even more so this season. I really like the fact that they seem to have committed themselves to defending in terms of defending in numbers. You saw Salah yesterday helping Alexander Arnold multiple times. It feels as though they understand a little bit more that it's going to take an entire team effort, defensively more than anything else. And they've obviously got the best defense in the league, only conceding I think 3 goals so far. Look, I think they found a way because it's Anfield and because they've still got more Salah, and I think on the overall basis, I thought they deserved it. To be fair, Chelsea, on the other hand, you could tell this is still, and that we mentioned it, if you remember going into the podcast, I said I wonder what they're going to be like in terms of when the going gets tough, and I thought they put forward a really good showing. First 15, 20, mainly all Chelsea, dominant, attacking in numbers. Both wingers when they got the ball were like attacking with Verve, Madueke on one side, Sancho on the other. The only thing disappointing, and I was texting your son actually back and forth during the game. The only thing from a Chelsea perspective, I think that was disappointing was the fact that they were getting the ball in behind their midfield, Liverpool's midfield, time and time again in the first half.
Yeah.
But they were then like passing it out wide as though to give up the advantage, which I never understand. And once you get in behind that midfield, you've got to run at the defenders and force a decision one way or another. No point giving up that advantage by just filtering the ball out wide and then making your way into the box in like the good old days. No, you force the defenders, the centre backs, to make critical decisions. And you saw that with their equalizer. As soon as I think it was, tell me if I'm wrong, Caicedo who got the ball, I think. But he turns, he passes vertically. You've got to pass vertically. Good things happen when you do that. You make a decisive action and a wonderful run and finish by Jackson. Again, the disappointment comes. This is what I mean about Chelsea sometimes still establishing some DNA, some stubbornness, some right, we're gonna dig in here. That experience that you'd say we've just got 1-1. Let's keep it 1-1 for 10 minutes or so, that kind of thing. And keeping a high line from that cross is just, I mean, it's criminal. I mean, you can't have that. And it's that type of experience and let's say bad moments that'll probably do them good over time if they stay with it and learn some lessons. But again, that's what a young and naive team does. They score and then they concede straight away. The goalkeeper's a bit half and half, and he's not fully into it. In terms of coming out and claiming the entire ball and all the rest of it. It's very flimsy. And you might say he's hurt by the fact that there's been a penalty given in the first half. There's been another penalty potentially given against him, which was rightfully overruled. But he's maybe feeling a little bit of that. But look, I thought Liverpool on the whole deserved it just. But I think Chelsea, just in terms of the way they knocked it around, the way they played, the fact that they were committed to getting the ball in behind the midfield time and time again, I still think they're lacking what I would call is just a little bit of conviction, a little bit of decisiveness in terms of, hey, I mean, even that cross at the end from Neto, if you've done that over time and time again, you've got familiarity with players and teams. You've seen that with Arsenal sometimes. Saka on the same side. You've got Trossard coming in scoring last year against Chelsea. You've got Martinelli this year scoring in the last league game before Bournemouth. That kind of action, I think Kunku's just a little bit half and half, and it's maybe just that familiarity. So I think that's just growing pains. I think that's just the things that you go through, that you learn through playing together time and time again, which I think will come. There were some real good signs. I thought Caicedo was very good.
Hmm.
Gary Neville seemed to indicate that he wasn't, but I watched a game where I thought he was really good in the middle of the park. But yeah, I think lots to like for both teams. Liverpool, huge win going into the Emirates now with a lot of confidence. They'll feel like if they can, and we'll speak about it going into the weekend, but if they can make Arsenal play a little bit emotionally, I think Liverpool will feel confident going into that game as well. So, incredible game. I thought it was a really good game. Yeah, really fun game to watch. Two teams wanting to win the game, and in the end, Liverpool's experience maybe just played out.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely spot on. Chelsea, I was impressed. I really was impressed. I mean, it's a team that's been in flux at this for the last sort of 3 or 4 years. But I think now they've got an excellent squad. And this coach, he's only had 6, 7, 8 games, but he seems to be putting his marker down. What I saw yesterday, I mean, in terms of the stats, Chelsea were ahead on possession, shots on goal. So there are a number of uh, metrics that they were better than Liverpool. And I think it was a draw would have been a fair result. I think it was a game where there wasn't much between the two sides. Maybe it's just the experience Liverpool have had over the last few years have always been there or thereabouts. So they've got that maybe that sort of that winning mentality, that sort of killer instinct when it matters. But Chelsea looked good. I think the only problem, I think, and it's a good problem to have, is what's his best starting 11? What teams does he? Because there's so many good players. You're right about Caicedo. I don't know what Neville was talking about. He was watching a different game because I thought he was outstanding. That was a crucial victory for Liverpool because this was a real test. And I was thinking at the time as well that if this was Klopp's Liverpool, what would have been the outcome? I think. I mean, it's difficult because I suppose. I mean, you're never quite sure exactly how it would have turned out if it was Klopp. But I think if it was Klopp, they probably wouldn't have won the game.
How
But
dare
even
you?
yeah,
How
but no,
dare
but
you?
this just shows the fickle nature of football fans. Klopp was a hero; he was a
Show,
demigod, but
show,
now he's got.
it shows the fickle nature of you. That's what it does.
But it was. Uh, I mean, I still think there were times where it was too easy for Chelsea sometimes. Just, I mean, there was gaping holes in the middle of the park. So whilst it was much more meticulous and organised from Liverpool, there were moments that, but that's credit to Chelsea. I thought Chelsea played very well. I give credit to Liverpool because this was a stern test. It was a really hard test, and I think they they've successfully overcome a very difficult challenge presented by them, and I think obviously it all goes well against Arsenal now because I think this will fill them with confidence. So uh, you're right, enjoyable game to watch. I mean, if you're looking for free flowing, spectacular football, it probably wasn't this, but in fact, I probably enjoy games like this much more because it's a real challenge, physically and mentally as well, to stay absolutely on it because of if you switch off for a fraction of a second, it could mean conceding a goal. So enjoyable game from obviously as a sort of Liverpool supporter. Uh, it was great, but I really enjoyed it, and I think Chelsea, or if you're a Chelsea fan, I would be very optimistic going forward because I think this Chelsea side is one to be reckoned with. Don't I mean we talk about the top three, Arsenal, Man City, and Liverpool. Don't write off Chelsea. They're a side to be reckoned with. I think there's a lot of quality, and this coach is perhaps the right coach now for this side.
Yeah, I mean, when I watched them yesterday, I was thinking, what's the overriding adjective that I would think about when I was watching Chelsea? And you should never think about it. It's just one game. But, they went to Liverpool and I thought played with a great deal of personality. Now, some might argue, well, they've got 80 million, 100 million pound players everywhere. They should be playing with a certain sense of personality, but it's not always the case. I'm trying to be really fair with them. I think they were not. They played nice. That was the word that came to me. They looked nice. They looked tidy. Again, the only thing for me that was missing was perhaps a level of conviction in terms of trying to make the decisive action, trying to force a situation where they're going to get a shot away, where they're going to get a chance away. I mean, or a shot on goal away. I mean, you saw that a little bit maybe in the second, in the first half at the end, if you remember that ball that was slid through the side. Jackson, I think, hit the base of the bar on the post. I think when he did his hip, when he got a little bit of a hip injury, um, but not enough. Again, vertical actions. I think it's nice, it's tidy, and there's still again lots of good moments. And I thought Neto was also pretty lively when he came on. Created some great situations by running at the Liverpool team, and that's what you want. But look, they've got a plethora of options. I'm with you. I think in terms of going forward, I think for the most part, I think a lot of the players right now, I would argue actually their base and forward line is relatively, and I say relatively settled. So what I mean is it's always going to be Caicedo, probably one of Fernandez and Lavia. Lavia looked pretty decent as well, I thought. But then Palmer plays, Madueke for the time being plays, and Jackson plays. So it's really a case of, well, is it Sancho? Is it Neto? Is it Lavia? Is it Fernandez? So I think for the most part, in terms of that base and forward line, it's relatively settled, I would say, until further notice or if form drops. I think it's at the back where they'll probably want to get a relatively settled team. James, I thought, had a decent 60 minutes coming back from injury. Again,
Mm.
he was committed to playing those balls into the middle of the park. I really like that from Chelsea. You could tell it was a clear tactic, play the ball through the middle, try and get in behind that Liverpool midfield. So I think at the back is where, and that's probably the most important from a chemistry perspective, discipline perspective. Goalkeepers got question marks. Centre backs right now have a few question marks. Selection, form, fitness, suspensions, all the rest of it. So I think that's where the questions lie. They've conceded goals this season. Goalkeepers had a few nightmares as well, let's be honest. So I think some of that area will perhaps, in my opinion, prevent them from a sustained title challenge this season. The problem is I can't speak about next season because if there's one team I can't give any benefit of the doubt in terms of this ability to grow season on season, it's Chelsea. It's Chelsea because the fact is things could go very sideways in the second half of the season, and who knows, the manager's out again. I think there's some decent foundation. I'm with you. I just hope they stick with it, they build on it, and I think there's the nucleus of something good there.
Mm.
But again, Chelsea's the one club. It's a case of week by week. Let's just see how it goes because again, that's the one club I just can't give the benefit of the doubt to in terms of any sustained long-term planning.
I mean, there is a volatility in terms of the owners and what decisions they make, but certainly from what I saw, I would sort of say that they're going to finish top three. They
Top
will
three?
break
Well,
that. Yep,
hang on,
absolutely.
hang
No,
on.
no, absolutely.
Say
I'm
it.
putting it out there
Just
now.
say it.
I'm putting it out there now.
So it's clearly the Arsenal who are gonna have to give up their citizenship, right?
Yeah. So something's going to give, and I think you're right. It's the Arsenal. I think I was very, very impressed, and they are going to give. I think the big teams. Well, I say the big teams. There's only two or three big teams in that Premier League, but Chelsea will not be an easy proposition for anybody. And as I said, it'll give them a huge amount of confidence as well, because I presume when they went to Anfield, they're probably thinking that, look, this is our toughest test thus far. It's a game that really we've not had the best of Liverpool. I don't think that we've had the best of Liverpool for a number of years. But I think this will give them a huge amount of confidence. I think they went toe to toe with Liverpool. Uh, on another day, it might have been in their favour because, as I said, I mean they had shots on goal, they had possession, and they played well. It's not just a case of possession. I've never been one where, right, you had 60% possession, that's it. No, no, you've got to do something with the ball, and I think there was enough there. And maybe on another day, I mean, I think they'll be chomping at the bit to play all of the big sides at their place, because I think there will be a serious threat this season. And I'm saying top three now, today.
Uh, I think they played Man City at Stamford Bridge. They lost. They played Liverpool at Anfield. They've lost. Look, I think they're a nice team and they're a good team and they're on the up. But I would just be cautious. I think it was the Liverpool game last year when you profoundly claimed that they were back. And the manager didn't see out 3 months, I think.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah.
so
I too, yeah. It
yeah,
was the kiss of death, weren't it?
it was the
No,
kiss
but
of death.
there's enough now. I think obviously they were plagued with injuries. I mean, Caicedo, I'm not sure how many games that he played. Lavia as well. I mean, he hardly got a look in. So, and the midfield is a key sort of part of any side. And if you've got players sort of 130, 140 million pound worth of talent sort of sideline, it's going to have an impact. But I think with those players in, and there's so much talent. I mean, you look at, I mean, they've spent a huge amount of money, but there's some good players that they bought. So I would be, as a Chelsea fan, I'd be looking at top three.
One last story, if I may. It's just interesting to me. That's why I'm keen to hear your thoughts. Howard Webb was at the game between Bournemouth and Arsenal, and he had an earpiece, a wired earpiece. I mean, it's 2024. They do Bluetooth devices nowadays, but anyway, we digress. A wired piece, and during the Saliba incident, in which obviously there was a little bit of furore, a little bit of time and all the rest of it. He was seen obviously, kind of pressing his uh, earpiece, let's say, and furiously texting away. Now, uh, they pushed it to the Premier League that what was all that about? Because I don't know if you watched the overlap piece, and he spoke, by the way, very well on the overlap piece. It was quite enlightening from my side as well in terms of just understanding a few more aspects. He spoke really well on the overlap, but he was clearly there was some involvement there. Now, two questions. One is, so they pushed it to him just to give you a little bit of insight to this. So they asked the PGMOL that, hey, what was all this about? Howard Webb at the game, like getting involved and all the rest of it. Now, they said it was so that Howard Webb could listen in on the VAR communication. So that's what he was doing in real life time. He had a feed between the VAR and the referee and the assistant referees and all the rest of it. Now, there's two things. There's issues there for me. Is firstly, all the recordings are done anyway, so you can listen to it after the event. So there's no issues there. I mean, you can listen to it after the event. So the fact is, either he doesn't trust his colleagues or his subordinates, I guess, because he is the chief, to do their job effectively. So he's listening in real lifetime. So that's the first thing I would say.
Mm.
Now, what I would say is what's closer is the second point, which is that not only is he listening in, but the fact is he was furiously texting away during the Saliba incident, which means for me, in my humble opinion, and this is something they rejected, by the way, they said he was simply listening in. But if you're simply just listening into the communication, I don't see the benefit of that because he can listen to it afterwards. For me, it only makes a material difference if he's listening in, if he has the option of intervening in some way, shape, or form, which is what he was doing. I mean, he wasn't texting his wife to say,
Mm.
I think I left the gas on, could he just check? It was a case of, you could tell he was texting the team, whatever that looked like, right? So for me, that is a little bit unsatisfactory, actually, because A, you've got your chief listening in on everything. Plus, he's then intervening to some extent. You can see it clearly. I mean, it's night and day. I mean, if you read body language, he's clearly texting that situation. I mean, that's not written in the rules anywhere, that this is how the decision-making process will be done, right? In terms
Mm.
of
Mm,
how the chief, if he's there at the game. Now, my thing is this: there's multiple issues here. I don't like that. That's the first thing because he's intervening into the decision making process for me. Clearly, I mean that's pretty obvious. But if he's going to do that, I mean, you do it from behind closed doors, surely. You don't need to be there front and center up in the stands with an earpiece, plus with
mm.
your phone out, texting away to the VAR crew. Clearly, again, it's you can tell it's pretty obvious he's texting the team something they've rejected, but I'm not having that. So what's your take on that? He's been on the overlap a week before explaining all of this. We know this year there have been still a number of issues, lots of inconsistencies. And look, it's football's a subjective sport for the most part anyway. But it didn't feel comfortable to me, at least the way, again, I've laid it out for you. What do you think in terms of how all that plays out?
Well, he's got a massive ego, so it doesn't surprise me he wanted to at least have some sort of visibility. But in terms of, I have no issue with him listening in real time, and I'll explain the reason why in what why I would want him to actually listen in real time. Because in a sense, if you listen to it afterwards, perhaps what you want to do is be caught up in the emotion as well. Because uh, being an official, it's a very it's a highly charged uh, environment. So therefore, perhaps if he's listening in real time, he's aware of the emotions that are running at the time. If he's listening afterwards, perhaps it's much calmer. It's after the event, and perhaps the decision making is slightly different if it's after the event. So that I have no problem. But in terms of then texting and messaging, that is bang out of order. That's not his job. I mean, as I said, this is it's. I've had many an issue with officials who they want to be center stage, and I think he was one of those characters who want to be center stage. So I have no issue with real time because I think it's important that he's evaluating with the atmosphere, with the emotions, because then he can sort of say, well, look, I can understand why you made that decision because the crowd were going berserk, they were going nuts. So at least it gives him that perspective. Uh, but he should not in any way be making any decisions or influencing any decisions. That's not his job.
In my
Uh,
Yeah, and look, in my really again, interesting to hear your thoughts. I mean, I'm okay with your reasoning for why he may wish to hear it in live time. Again, I would prefer he does that behind closed doors. You are the
yeah.
head of the referees, and this is a fundamental. You know, there's going to be one controversial incident regardless. It doesn't have to be a red card, could be a penalty incident, could be something. The fact that he's front and center, you can still do that behind closed doors, right? He can be at the ground, watch it in a box. Even being in the box, he wouldn't have been as visible, let's say.
Mhm.
But the fact he's up there in the stands, similar to, let's say, again, giving you the argument about Mark Clattenburg with Forest. You remember how much that caused a distraction, then he resigned, especially when
Mhm.
like Nottingham Forest put out statements and all the rest of it, which were quite, let's say, distasteful and all the rest of it. Him being there in the stands, talking to the owner when bad decisions are happening. And it just creates a little bad aura, bad vibe. And Howard Webb, I can't for the life of me understand why he's listening ear front and center live for the cameras to pan to. That's the first thing.
Mhm.
Secondly, speaking to the guy next to him, explaining it clearly you can tell from a body language and his hand gestures about distance and the ball and all the rest of it. Plus, he's furiously texting away. Who's he texting? Again,
Mhm.
I'm not saying I need to know this. Again, it's minor. These are minor points. Again, I've articulated. I don't think Arsenal deserve much from the game. All the rest of it. But the fact that he's intervening in a decision-making process, and I will always believe he intervened in that decision. I don't care whether it's by exerting direct influence or suggestive influence or whatever it may be. It just leaves me feeling a little bit uncomfortable because every week there's decisions made where there's various different rationale given for the reasoning given, let's say for the decisions, and they all seem a bit inconsistent to me in terms of, well, we gave this because of X and we gave this because of Y, and Michael Oliver doesn't want to send off Kovacic last year against Arsenal because he doesn't want to interfere in a big game. He doesn't want to make a big decision. And then Michael Oliver, 12 months later, sends off Trossard when he could have
Mhm.
easily just had a word. Perhaps because again, I don't want to go too much into Trossard one, but it's a bugbear of mine, just the speed at which the whistle and then Trossard's kick. Again, I'm just being
Mhm.
very open and honest. I don't think you can definitively say that Trossard kicked the ball. I know we're going off kilter, but Trossard kicked the ball after clearly hearing the whistle. It happened in relatively kind of split seconds, if that makes sense, and in a highly charged atmosphere. To your point, you when there's emotion and it's the Etihad and the crowd and all the rest of it. I don't think you can you don't make those big calls where you like it's going to be such a prohibitive measure record. Anyway, we digress. I thought it was a bad look for Howard Webb. I really did. And I think to your point, you need to be less visible, in my opinion, to some extent. But maybe this is his way of thinking that I take the heat off some of the referees, but I'm not sure it's going to work.
But we're there again, talking about referees and poor decisions. Uh, it's either that, it's VAR, it's just something needs to be done. I mean, we keep saying that, so I mean, I don't know whether it's possible to actually do something, but
Yeah.
it just the I mean, it's the biggest show in the world.
Well,
But we just have we're always virtually every single week, either a VAR or officials.
Well, yeah, and just to reiterate, sorry, I have to say, just to reiterate, I don't necessarily think it was a bad call, by the way, on that one. I think we shared covered that in the first segment, but he speaks about on the overlap about how this year more than any, the speed of the calls has been much lower because they've introduced this thing called referee's call, which basically means if it's a bit of this and a bit of that, I'm gonna let go with the referee, and that speeds up the decision making process because VAR is trying not to intervene unless it's a clear howler. Again, I would argue the referee's seen the incident, rightly or wrongly, but he's seen it. He's not impeded whatsoever by distance. There's no new material information that's going to come to light. Yet the VAR has intervened by saying, no, 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 you need to have a look at this again. And that's my point. It's just one day they talk about this referee's call. The referee made a call. I don't think there's any new information, and yet they've sent him. So my point is, it's this inconsistent reasoning that's sometimes offered, and that makes you think, okay, cool, but how does that apply here? So that would be my major issue. Anyway, we've probably gone on too long on that subject.
No, maybe I mean, my final point in that, maybe there's a huge disconnect. There needs to be officials, footballers, maybe ex-footballers, and somewhere they need to perhaps thrash out how they move forward on this, because as I said, I mean, we talk about this virtually every single week. There's always some sort of controversy, and it's not getting any better. It's not getting any better. So I don't know what the solution is, but certainly I think officials and players perhaps talking maybe the start. But that's my thoughts. Right. We've gone on for I don't know how long we've gone on for, but it's been interesting. It's been interesting because it's been a cracking weekend of football. So uh and on that note, we're going to sort of say, well, we'll see you probably on Friday, because obviously we want to shoot start regularly. Otis is on holiday. I don't know where he is. Is that whereabouts are you?
We came to Fujairah for 3 or 4 days. Just it's half term. I think it's the half term in the UK as well.
Yeah, it is. Yes,
So
yes.
we've come for a little break to Fujairah. It's really nice. It's about an hour and a half away from where we live. But yeah, I'm just in the hotel. I'm surprised the Wi-Fi stayed pretty strong throughout. But anyway, yeah, it's very nice. Really nice part of town. Bit quiet. And it actually rained a little bit earlier today, which was interesting. Doesn't rain much, I promise you.
I was going to sort of say that's incredible. I mean, that's almost like a miracle, isn't it? Really. All right. So as always, great to speak to you. Hopefully, we'll try and sort of catch up on Friday. Just do a little preview of the Premier League. But that's our thoughts. Pop your comments down. What's your thoughts on all the subjects that we talked about? All right. So have a nice evening. It'll probably be night or morning when you're watching this. So whatever the time is, have a great day. Have a great evening, and we'll see you soon. See you later.